Ivy and Gecko acknowledges the traditional owners of country throughout Australia, and we pay our respects to elders past, present and future. Welcome to Hearts and Minds. Our podcast episodes feature conversations with highly accomplished mining executives and board directors. We'll explore critical themes relating to leadership impact, staff engagement and culture development. So tune in, enjoy the conversations and prepare to be inspired. I'm Alana Bray-White, the Managing Director of Ivy and Gecko, and this is our podcast, Hearts and Minds.
A good leader is adaptable. I think different circumstances in different environments, it means you do have to be adaptable. But I would argue the core premises of leadership, and you can talk about, all the technical stuff, drive the assets, balance sheets, all that stuff. But I think at the core of leadership has to be empathy for the people that you work with. That doesn't mean you need to go down the pub every night, but you have to have general empathy with them. And a good leader is there, no different to us talking about football. A leader is a good coach, a good facilitator who can bring that team together to get the outcome.
Our guest today is Mike Spreadborough. Mike has gained over 30 years' experience in technical, executive and board roles with ASX and TSX listed explorers, developers and producers. With exposure across the gold, base metals, rare earths and iron ore industries, he has held leadership positions for operations, project development and financing, business development and corporate governance. Currently, Mike is the executive co-chairman of Novo Resources, an explorer and developer of gold and copper projects in Australia. And additionally, he is the non-executive director of Arafura Rare Earths. We hope you enjoy this conversation with one of the industry's most charismatic leaders.
Mike Spreadborough, thanks for joining us on Hearts and Minds.
Good to be here, I think, David.
How are the legs feeling after a 26-kilometre section of the Bibbulmun track?
I feel very good, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later.
Tell me, did you take a radio with you to listen to the Broncos game?
No, that was very nicely on Friday night. And we did
right.
Win, so that's good to see.
Oh, good timing. Well, good on you for doing that long trek with your beloved. I do parts of it from time to time myself, but never quite that long in one go. So good on you. Really good to have you on the podcast. As you know, this program is all about having conversations with board directors and executives of project developers and mining companies with a view to extracting some insights from them about their leadership experience and how they've developed their skills in that area to be more engaging with people and to help develop healthy cultures. Really looking forward to hearing about some of your experience. Before we go there, tell us a bit about your early background.
A little bit alluded to, and get the elephant out. I am a Queenslander, so I did grow up in Queensland and went to universities in Queensland as a mine engineer. My father was a school principal, so he moved a bit around, Queensland as his career took up. And even before that, in my very, very early days, 3, 4, 5 years of age, I was in P&G in Port Moresby because my father's career after Teachers College went up to there. So I spent a bit of time. So I grew up in Queensland, did school back in Brisbane and then kind of university. So that was the background. I've got two brothers and a sister. I'm the eldest there, and they're all back home, as I say, in Queensland. But to be honest, I've now been in Western Australia 3 parts of my career and been here almost full-time, I think, 2012.
So we can call you a sandgroper now. Yeah.
Definitely not. I remain fully a Queenslander all the way through.
You've just alienated half our audience now, Mike.
Indeed.
University, what did you do there?
So I studied mining engineering. That's an interesting choice. If you'd asked me, grade 11, at one stage I wanted to be a biochemist, right? And so I'm glad I didn't go down that path. I don't think I would have been a very patient scientist in a white suit. I don't think that would have suited me at all.
Well, you are a Queenslander, though. Wearing a white suit with the white loafers would go down well, I would have thought.
Yeah, so, engineering was the go, and mining kind of suited the skill set that I kind of liked. But, I've got to be honest, what I thought mine engineering was and what I do now is very, very different, But the concept of engineering and being able to, deal with complex problems. I'm a builder. I like to build things, develop things. I think that's what drove me to doing engineering. But, I've got to mention, my daughter's going to be graduate this year in an automation engineer. So we'll talk a bit about that later. But, I've kind of not dragged her into the mining industry.
And you've obviously showed some business acumen. You've ended up with an MBA as well.
From really early stages of my career, I've always liked a holistic approach to mining. Right? So, my career has expanded everything from, mine development, technical work in doing feasibility studies, constructing mines, running big operations. And, part of my career I ran all the ports for Rio Tinto. So I've done a lot of varied things. I like that holistic approach to mining. And so I think it's kind of a natural progression that I've kind of moved into. How do I provide that curiosity in building things into, being involved in the junior sector and boards going forward.
So did you commence your career in mining in Queensland, or was that when you come over to WA?
Yeah, so I've jumped across a bit. So straight after university, I came across here and worked at Hammersley Iron back in the day at Tom Price and also Power Purdue. But I always wanted to go underground. And so I moved through CRA to Broken Hill. Probably in the days I didn't read the Australian Financial Review that often, because 6 weeks later we became Pasmenco. So I was there for 5 years, Broken Hill. That's where I met my wife, by the way, so a bit of a connection there.
She's an engineer?
My wife's a psychologist, so she probably knows more about me than you do, David. And then, from Broken Hill, I did my underground time, worked as a supervisor, superintendent, did mine planning. Really keen to get into studies work, so I came across here to Perth. So that was kind of the second trip back to Western Australia. My wife's family live here down in Freo. So coming back here, worked for North Limited on Kanata Bell, went through the studies and built that mine. So there's, mine built number one. Really enjoyed that time. It was a great organisation, which was really, really good. My career's kind of moved off from there.
As you say, very holistic. You've seen a lot of different commodities, iron ore, base metals, gold, rare earths. You've had exposure, underground, open pit, at the studies end of the life cycle of a mine through to production. So you've got a lot of diverse experience there. When you're not working, Mike, and you may say you're trekking the Bibbulmun track, what do you do to relax?
Look, work consumes a fair bit of my life, and definitely, the family life is really important to me. But I do, the big key for me in relaxing is I do like to travel, and my wife's really accentuated that travel ever since we've been together. So we travel every year somewhere in the world. Hopefully, we drag our daughter along, but we're not talking about 5-star travel, David. You won't find me in the lobby of the Ritz. So, we still, at later age, I suppose, can we say that? We still backpack, right? And sleep low, eat high, and we will travel around the world. So,
what's your favourite spot so far that you've visited?
I don't pick one because we never go back anywhere again. So there's too many places in the world to visit. So I only go there once. I try to go somewhere. We went to Sri Lanka. We went there for 4 weeks. Because we'll never go back. So, but it's been great that kind of since my daughter got a bit older, we've dragged her along. So I've taken her kayaking in New Zealand, and she went to base camp in Everest, and to celebrate her year 12. I don't know if it's a great celebration, but we climbed Kilimanjaro. So done Kokoda for my 50th, and for my 60th, which is coming up too close, we plan to burn Bataan. So,
wow.
So I like to trek. I like to enjoy different cultures. I think it challenges you when you are living in a city like Perth, the industry that we live in, to go and enjoy different cultures. That's really important to me, and talk to the locals. I love having a good chat to them and experience some of the challenge you both physically and mentally to do some of those things that I've done.
Let's talk about leadership. You've held leadership responsibility both at the board level and the executive level. What's the purpose of leadership, and how do you define the qualities of great leadership?
A good leader is adaptable. I think different circumstances in different environments, it means you do have to be adaptable. But I would argue the core premises of leadership, and you can talk about all the technical stuff, drive the assets, balance sheets, all that stuff. But I think at the core of leadership has to be empathy for the people that you work with. That doesn't mean you need to go down the pub every night, but you have to have general empathy with them. And a good leader is there, no different to us talking about football. You know, a leader is a good coach, a good facilitator who can bring that team together to get the outcomes. Now, that doesn't mean you shy away from the tough decisions. That's a big part of leadership. I don't think anyone in the organisation has a role like leadership in instigating change, whether it's good or bad. That's a big part of leadership. But I think at the end of the day, you generally have to be a passionate person, committed to it. If the leader isn't passionate or committed, your team and also, you know, the wider external audience won't like it. So I think that's what leadership is. At the end of the day, it boils down to people. I do think in the current environment that we are, leadership, leaders have to have core technical skills that maybe they've never had to have before.
Yes, you mentioned a number of qualities there that I think are critical for good leadership, and most people would mention empathy as one. I think you really have to demonstrate that you care for the well-being of your people. You know, they won't give you their hearts and minds unless they know that you have a genuine interest and care for their well-being. And I think listening, you mentioned that as well. Most people at the leadership level are technocrats in the mining industry. They came from a technical grounding, and very often I think they are somewhat short of great skills in terms of their ability to actively listen to people. And I think that's one of the areas that many managers and executives need to work on. You and I have met on a number of occasions. You seem to be a very good listener. What advice would you give to others in terms of how to enhance their listening skills?
If you ask the young Michael, the young engineer Michael, I don't think I was a good listener, and I was probably an impatient young man. So I think listening is important. But, you know, you would tell us in any feedback or any conversation, it's a two-way conversation. So listening is part of that two-way conversation. And I think that's part of, you know, leadership is to provide listening, but then match it with critical thinking. You know, a conversation where you listen that doesn't come out with an action kind of doesn't go anywhere. So on top of listening, I think you've got to be able to comprehend, have good critical thinking. Interesting, your comments about leadership. I was just thinking then, there's a lot of leaders that we see in our industry in Australia who don't come across generally day to day as, you know, great people persons. And I don't think leaders are necessarily good people persons. But to me, the core of a leader comes out in times of crisis. That's when you see the core person and their empathy, because that's when people come across the best. And we probably can think of a lot of leaders in the Australian industry that at times of crisis, we haven't seen that empathy or understanding of people and stakeholders.
You're right. Crisis brings out the best in leaders and in people generally. And I think you know, those who have a certain level of courage over comfort, people who are prepared to make those hard calls and make the sacrifices, sets a really good example for other people. And leadership, like parenting, is about role modelling behaviours that you want replicated by the people that you serve. Tell us about some of the challenges, Mike, that you face in your current board roles. So you're a co-executive chairman of Novo Resources and you're a non-executive director of Arafura Rare Earths. Tell us a little bit about some of the specific challenges that you're facing in those roles.
I think the first thing I'd say is something that I've learned is definitely being chairman of the board or being executive chairman of the board is very different to being a non-executive director. You've probably read books. We've all read books. The board is a very different team, and I think it takes a long time sometimes for people who come out of big operational roles or big corporate roles to understand that it is a very, very different team. But it's a very powerful team. I'm fortunate on both boards that we've got excellent people. So, you know, that classic skills matrix on both our Arafura board and the Novo Resources board, we've got people with the right skills for the right time. I think that's the other thing. I don't know if that's common through some of the boards that we definitely see in the junior sector, but we've got a great bunch of experiences team. I think we've got a collegiate boards in both cases. There's a very clear collaboration with management. I think that's key. But there is also, a difference in roles between the directors and thing. And so directors shouldn't dip down and managers should not assume that they have the authority of the board. A good board will have good, open discussions and come up with collaborative decision making. I think that's really important. Now, boards are very different animals. Both of the boards that I'm on are boards that are quite open because we don't have a major shareholder as part of the board. So board dynamics change depending on the business and, as I said, the time. Arafura, we're in the process of funding the board. We've got a great team for that around the board. Novo Resources, we're Explorer trying to find projects. So the board composition and style has to suit the journey that you're going forwards. And clearly we're there for the shareholders.
It's a big responsibility, obviously, leading a board. You have usually a small group of intelligent people, sometimes quite opinionated in terms of having firm points of view on matters, and certain egos along the way. And it is an art form, isn't it, Mike, to be able to manage the dynamics of those personalities and to allow everybody to make the best contribution they can make to help the overall team reach a decision. You raised a point there which I think is interesting, that certain individuals are right for certain boards depending on where that company is at in the life cycle of the mining project cycle. So not all NEDs would be ideal, for example, in a junior explorer as they might be at a more mature producer. Do you have any further comments on the suitability of people for companies at different stages of the cycle?
In pure, board dynamics, it's understanding the skill sets that you need, because it is a bit different in that journey. So I think that's important. I think it's important that whoever is chair, a good chairman can read the board dynamics, but also understand the different personalities you talked about and how to get the best out of people. So good chairmen tend to be good leaders, I think, and good readers of people. So I think that's really, really important. But boards are important. Collegiate decision making, I think, is important. Everyone around the board table should be passionate. There's nothing disheartening to management to turn up to a meeting and find that no one's read the board papers or read the board papers but aren't asking any critical questions, because that's a big part of the role. So it is for people in executive manager, whatever, it is a journey moving into boards. It's probably no different in my experience than anything else. Great to talk to people and find mentors to help you along the way. It is kind of almost a natural progression, a lot of us, if we continue to want to be in the industry, to be in director roles. It's more work than the dollars, I've got to say, on the junior sector. It's more effort than what the pay packet is, which I think is a long-term issue that we have, because to keep up to date with what's going on, I know we'll probably talk about AI and every other things, but to keep up to date with the governance and what's going on in the world, a lot of work to be an effective director.
It sure is. Do you think you necessarily need to have been a good executive in order to become a good director?
No, not at all. Because again, if the board's got the right composition, you've picked up that skill set somewhere else. You just need directors to have respect around the table for what other people are bringing. But no, it's a different role. But in my opinion, very hard to have a company that's got a large operating mine, as an example, and you're not having a previous operating executive on the board. That would be unusual. The same would be pretty unusual for an explorer not to have a geologist. And I'd always argue none of us can have a board without someone in finance. So there's a plug for finance from an engineer.
It seems to me, Mike, that many executives have a bit of a love-hate relationship with the concept of empowerment. Now, we read books and we talk to people and we hear that by empowering people, giving them autonomy, giving them responsibility, that helps in terms of their engagement and their commitment to the job. But I see many executives who feel uncomfortable empowering some of their staff because they don't really trust them in terms of their capability. They find it hard letting go of that control. Do you have a perspective on this?
Is empowerment still the buzzword? I'm not sure. I haven't heard that word for a long time, I've got to admit, David. A good organisation and good leaders will get the best out of their team. Right. And the best way that will happen, whether you want to call it empowerment or whatever else, is the team understands the goals, it understands individual members, understands their role. You've worked on them to make sure they understand their boundaries. You want them to get on and do their job. So I'm not sure if that's empowerment, but I think that's important. And it's actually more important in the junior sector, as I found, in Novo Resources, we've got 25 people, and part of my career I looked after all the ports for Rio and had 2,000 people. Sometimes it's more difficult working with 25 people than a large organisation, because a large organisation, you're relying on the hierarchy to provide a lot of that, empowerment, so to speak, or authorities. So, to me, empowerment is about making sure that the team members can get on and do their job and are comfortable asking questions and being fulfilled in the work that they're doing. I'd probably also say they have a right to fail. Now, that's a bit tougher in the smaller end of the industry, but, at a different levels, I think everyone needs to learn and make mistakes. I've made mistakes and people have forgiven me for that, or, it's been a mentoring. So I think that's part of empowerment, or is it, I don't know, is it the other side of empowerment? I'm not sure.
Is there a memorable mistake that you're prepared to talk about that has helped you become a better leader?
Probably far too many to listen, but I would definitely say that, a good leader will help mentor you as a young person, or even if you're an older person, through those errors of judgment or mistakes that you make. That's just part of culture and improving yourself, I suppose.
Yeah, coaching and mentoring, very important for younger people climbing the ranks. And you made an interesting point that in a very small company, a small exploration business, for example, there's nowhere to hide, there's no bureaucracy or hierarchy. You own your achievements and you own your mistakes. And I think in that sort of environment, you do need mentoring managers, people who are prepared to take someone under their wing and protect them to some extent from the harshness of the reality, but slowly to develop their skills so they're able to realise their full potential. Mike, we're in a bit of a crisis, I believe, in terms of the number of mining professionals coming out of the tertiary institutions. I had Jim Walker on this podcast. As well as being chair of Diggers and Dealers, he chairs the WA State Training Board, and he was lamenting about the number of not only degree qualified people coming out, but skilled labour and trade qualified people as well. What's the answer? To build the mines that we desperately need to build. We need people, but there is a definite shortage.
I think, and that shortage, I think, is only going to get worse. So, as I said before, I'll give you an example. My daughter's studying automation engineering, and she's going to graduate, and she's probably got all desires to work anything other than in the mining industry. Although she's been fortunate, she spent 3 years working with a state-of-the-art company working on autonomous dump trucks. Not necessarily how you use them, but at the front end, actually designing the code. So I would argue she's a mining engineer of 2025 as opposed to me as a mining engineer in 1986 when I graduated. So the reason I say that is I think we could be our worst enemies in that we're not lateral in our thinking. In some areas we've fought pretty hard, I think, as an industry against paraprofessionals. We've fought hard to keep everything running in a nice train line. As I said, you're a mine engineer, you're a geologist or whatever else. Our industry is changing, whether it's an automation engineer geology is getting more and more mathematics. If you look at some of the new innovations, it's high-tech maths and stats. So, yeah, there is a skills shortage, but some of it is probably because we're not actually delving into the right fields. Now, having said that, you can see through the job ads, the bigger companies, not that I talk to them too much about them, but the Rios and the BHPs and others are out there looking for data scientists and robotics engineers and all of those things. And it's not just engineering, it's all the way through the skill set to environment and everything else. So I think we have to be a little bit thinking outside the box on the people that we want. We need to, it's a bit different. I graduated in engineering and I had no desire to sit around in a capital city. I grew up most of my life in the country. So again, we've got to keep making that transition for people. I think we need to provide and make it very transparent to people or out there as a path that, hey, look, you're going to be young, so you can go to a mine site and you might get married and have kids, so we can bring you back into the city on fly in, fly out, or a different career role. And then, when the kids leave and you become an empty nester, you can get back onto the mine site. So I think we need to be more flexible about that. Are we diverse enough? I'm not sure, and that's not just gender. I'm talking about diverse in thinking, and age. If we could become a bit ageist, we don't want old people with a lot of wisdom and prepared to pay them for the wisdom to be on mine sites or in technical teams. So it's a challenge for us. I think it will only get worse. Despite all the efforts, you probably know the stats more than I, but I'm not seeing a big increase in STEM kids come through.
Yeah, that's right. And you mentioned diversity there, and what any team of people needs is diversity of point of view, and however that is packaged in terms of gender or age or culture or ethnicity really doesn't matter. But you do need people who, as you say, can think critically about problems, offer out-of-the-box solutions at times to complex problems, and so that's what we need to develop in our younger people. And I think the industry has a challenge in terms of marketing its image. We need to sell what the mine of the future looks like to kids in primary and secondary schools, because when you graduated and I graduated, mining was a very different industry. It was in many ways more straightforward. There was a more narrow scope of skill sets that were sought, and as you rightly say, with technology advancing at the rate that it is, we need lots and lots of science-educated and skilled people. And I think, kids need to get on to mine sites as part of school tours. It is happening, and see what actually occurs on a mine site or in a process plant and get excited about it.
And now we take a short break to acknowledge our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Halo Civil Engineering. Halo is a multidiscipline civil contractor that specialises in the delivery of complex civil projects across defence, infrastructure, energy and resources. A West Australian company committed to delivering dynamic solutions with a focus on zero harm, while having a positive impact on their industry, clients and the people they serve. For more information, search for Halo Civil Engineering on socials or visit halocivil.com.
Is your business ready to amplify its voice? At Podwave Studios, we offer professional video podcast production services that help you connect with clients, build your brand, and grow your audience. From corporate messaging to thought leadership, we've got you covered. Book your session at podwavestudios.au today.
As the only executive search and leadership consulting firm to be admitted membership of the Minerals Council of Australia, Ivy & Gecko is uniquely resourced to advocate for the interests of our exploration, project development and mining clients.
Mike, let's talk a little bit about culture development. As a NED, should you have a role to play in influencing the tone of a company's culture? And if so, how do you go about that?
So the answer is, the board needs to be totally across the cultural landscape of their organisation. They do need to set the tone. Now, most of the organisation wouldn't see the tone of the board, but definitely the management would see the tone of the board. So there's a disconnect in culture between the board and management. As we know, culture's got a lot of different elements, but the board's got to be across that. And, the number one test for me always with culture is, safety performance. That's just paramount, and that connects back to people. But so the board, they need to get out and about. That's the best way to test culture and to ask questions. Look, we're all been in management roles. We kind of don't enjoy directors wandering around asking questions, but I'm old enough and ugly enough now to accept that it's a part of a healthy process, and that should happen.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think there is a general acceptance that the state of a business's culture, there is a business case for making that, healthy and strong.
A good test, David, is, bail up directors and ask them if they know the values of the organisation that's on the website. So I think we could have a beer, you and I, together in a pub or by ourselves, because I don't think many directors would know the values of their organisation.
And sadly, many of the values of many mining companies are a carbon copy. They are pretty much all the same, and to be honest, I think many of them are quite uninspiring and boring. I look at companies like IGO, a company that's got its fair share of challenges, but it's done very well, I think, in terms of creating value statements. One of them is let's run through the sprinklers together. To me, that's a different way of saying let's have fun and let's take a calculated risk and try something different. So it's the marketing people that came up with that, whoever they might have been, have thought carefully about how to pitch the value proposition of that company to younger people in particular. So I think you're right. All the metrics show that if we've got a safe and a healthy culture, the productivity goes up, engagement goes up, safety improves. Ultimately, productivity and profit increases. It seems to me there is a worldwide trend to reduce the impact or the importance of proactively seeking diversity in teams. We see it overseas in America, for example. Do you have any concerns, Mike, that the push for seeking diverse groups of people is on the wane here in Australia?
I haven't got a sense of that, and probably in the smaller sector, it's probably a bit hard to do the test. As I said before, I would hope that all companies in Australia continuing the pathway for diversity. At the end of the day, an organisation is about respecting what the individual can bring, not the individual, if that makes sense. It's what an individual can bring regardless of who or what they are. And I think, to me, that's important. It's kind of part of my integrity that I think the parents, gave to me, respect people for who they are, and probably part of the reason I like travelling around the world. It doesn't matter what people think outside for metrics and other else. Organisations have to be strong, and a good, diverse group of people is important.
In terms of opportunities and challenges in that exploration and project development segments of the industry, Mike, what are some of the big challenges facing explorers and developers?
Yeah, so it's straight up, the biggest challenge we'll have is land access. That is without the number one thing, and I'll come back to that in a minute. And then number two is clearly funding. Funding. I think behind all of that, climate change is a big challenge for us. And I don't think it's just necessarily about greenhouse gases and emissions. I think it's more about what climate change is meaning to us as an industry in terms of a shift to a different commodity. I think it's also a shift in the way our stakeholders are thinking about us as an industry, but also how they're reacting to, the need for different minerals. So again, I think climate change in its fullness is a big issue that we're missing a lot of it. And I suppose the bit I miss is right down on the risk side. Climate change is going to change, the physical environment that we work in as well. So climate change, I think, brings all of those elements. People want, as an example, people want a lot of critical minerals, but do they really understand what that actually means in terms of stakeholder engagement and land access and et cetera? So if that answers the question, that brings it all together to me, is this whole change. We can still see a world where gold will become less relevant. Right? Now, people talk about it. It hasn't happened. I don't think it will happen in the shortness of time that people predict. But we now know that coal, is irrelevant, and gas is less irrelevant. So climate change is going to cause a revolution in the society. And are we all there yet? On all levels? Shareholders, stakeholders, government, not a chance.
No, that's right. And we see evidence, in the nickel industry that the marketplace is not yet ready to pay a price premium for clean generated nickel product. It's quite happy to buy the dirtier stuff at a lower price. So, there's a lot of talk about accelerating the rate of decarbonisation, but the pragmatics of mining business dictate that you've got to do it on a more progressive basis, I think. And there is some criticism that some gold companies at the moment are over investing in renewable energy, and that's created big problems in terms of the viability of the mining. So it's a really tricky, challenging situation.
But I think it is important, as I said. I think if you just do those tests about what people see is the mine industry on the background of climate change, our industry is changing. We need to adapt to it. A long time ago, when I was part of the Sandfire and Chief Operating Officer, we as a team put the first solar array in Australia off-grid, and now they're all over the place. So we can't afford to be the first to be second anymore. We need to be leading innovation and driving all of that, and that'll help the stakeholders on top of that.
Yeah. We hear a lot about the critical minerals industry these days. The big player, I suppose, in Australia is Lynas. But Arafura, you're on the board of it, has a great project that's pretty much shovel-ready, I understand, in the Nolans project. What do you think the critical minerals landscape will look like in a few years? And I'm thinking from an M&A perspective. We see a lot of M&A in the gold industry. Is that going to occur in your rare earths area?
Oh, I think less so, given the processing challenges, and that's where the rare earths, and if you go through some of the other minerals that are required for decarbonisation that haven't been a big focus, it all comes back to processing. Mining's okay, but it's processing, and that's big capital. It is concentrated in a few countries. China, one of the big ones. So we as society or whatever else, if we want these products to keep the decarbonisation, we need more processing capacity, and people have to invest that. So we've found in Arafura fantastic support from the Australian government, fantastic support from our major shareholders, but we're still short of all the money that we need. So to get it off the path. So I think for the critical industries, we do need to turn the paradigm that the Western world can be good processing producers. The Arafura processing plant is a chemistry set. It's not a copper flotation circuit. We've got the skills in this country to do that. We were talking about skills before. There'd be nothing more exciting than young kids working on such a processing plant. So we need to get over that hub. Here we are in Western Australia. In some regards, we should be embarrassed with the lack of processing in this country.
Well, that's right.
And the other side is it takes us too long. You've got to say it. Regulations and approvals comes back to that stakeholder engagement as well. It takes us too long. And we've got to get over that hump. To me, that's the number one effort is providing the processing infrastructure. Yeah.
Australians are world-renowned miners, but we're not world-renowned processing or refining people. And I think that is slowly changing with the skill set and the experience being imported into the country. But you're dead right. We should be far more effective in terms of value-adding to our raw materials.
Yeah, but I'd argue there's no, we were, right? We were, so we can get back to that processing. It's different, If you go back to the past, BHP and still making aluminium, Bell Bay. So we were a big processing country. We've dropped the ball for the last probably 30 years. We just need to pick the ball up. We definitely have got the skill set. We just got to change the mindset.
You mentioned AI before. Generative artificial intelligence is pretty much mainstream in its application in the mining industry, particularly with the big companies. From your point of view, what are some of the key benefits and risks of the application of AI?
The risk is old blokes like us don't understand it and get on top of it. But if you go back in our careers, there's been technical or innovation all the way through. AI is just the next level. What do I want out of AI? Quicker decision making. That's the important thing. Now, whether that's pulling together data so people can see it much easier, someone helping you get through the critical thinking or through a crisis, doesn't matter to me. If this tool can help you speed up decision making, given all of the plethora of information and stuff that's happening there, go for it, right? Go for it. And so I think in the end it can only be positive. We'll go through some transformation in terms of skill sets and people like you and I understanding what it means. And, definitely, we've seen in recent times the unions are concerned on what it means in terms of jobs and whatever else. But, I think we've been having those discussions since the 1880s as different revolutions came through. So it'll be no different, the AI, and it's just here and grab it because it's not going away.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think you're right. In the past, innovations in technology have occurred. There's been a big fuss made about it. Sadly, it has meant some individuals who can't adapt or embrace new skills go by the wayside. But the reality is that the momentum continues, and it's pretty much unstoppable.
Oh, and I think the other thing is, as a society, we grab things pretty quickly and then complain, So I always laugh, you go out in the outback now and you kind of expect to have mobile phone coverage. Well, 10 years ago, you wouldn't even think about mobile phone. So I think we can move on quite quickly and then we challenge ourselves for the next thing. Our explorers in our company, doesn't matter where they work in Australia, they've got Starlink, it's fantastic. So AI is no different. You've just got to grab it and, help it along. Not helping my footy tips, but, I'm sure we'll find some good uses for AI.
Here's the exciting part of our program, the lightning round, Mike. Are you ready?
Oh, give us a go.
What are you most optimistic about?
Oh, despite our conversation, I think the mine industry is still a great place to work. I think there's going to be exciting challenges going forwards. Yeah, I think it's still good. The world's going to need our commodities. We've just got to somehow get the message and adapt to the new environment.
What's a big risk that we're not paying enough attention to?
I'd go back to my previous conversation. The holistic change brought about by climate change. But again, not just emissions, but what it means to the wholeness of what we need to do as an industry.
We've talked a bit about leadership. Who is the leader in any discipline of life that you most admire?
Yeah, I thought you gave me pre-warning on this one and I didn't come up with a person. And the reason I think is I'm the type of person, I'm quite eclectic with my reading and I like to grab different things. So I would say I've grabbed a bit from everyone that I've worked with, even the bad as well as the good. Yeah. So let's not talk about the bad leaders. But no, I think a good leader or a good person in their development will grab little bits rather than someone that I admire particularly.
Yeah, that's a good answer. I have a lot of leaders that I admire. I'm reading a book at the moment by an autobiography by Alexei Navalny. Who many of our listeners will know as the opposition leader in Russia, now deceased as of a couple of years ago. But the bravery and courage that man showed in the face of corruption and ultimately, he paid the ultimate price for it with a young family. He went back to Russia to face the music, to continue his activism. And it's hard, and he's in the category, I think, of people like Nelson Mandela, who showed incredible courage in the face of adversity. Now, what's a non-fiction book, Mike, that you found particularly valuable in terms of helping you in your career and leadership journey?
Yeah, as I just said, I've got a bit of an eclectic curiosity, so I've got a shelf full of different stuff. But I will tell you, there would be about a dozen books about Shackleton. And I've actually been to Shackleton's grave. So there's number one. I've always liked that whole story of the endurance. But I did pick out another one, some of your listeners. It's a bit of an old one here, but it's a book called Walk the Talk. And I can't remember the author, Caroline
Taylor.
Taylor, very good. Now, you know that book. So
read it. Great
I must
book.
have been on a good win then. But that's one of the books that I recommend to my mentees.
Yes.
It is about culture change, about bringing together teams. So we're on the same, I can't believe that. We're on the same wavelength.
Superb book. It's in my library at home. And she's also, for our listeners, she has a podcast as well, which I've very recently discovered. Brief 10-minute or so episodes, well worth listening to. What's an unpopular opinion that you have?
Oh, I think that's a tough one. Can I take a pass on that?
You can.
I think I might. Yeah, I do. I'd say professionally, I've occasionally got in trouble because I like to look for long-term gains. I'm quite happy to take a short-term hit to achieve long-term objectives. I think that's important. A bit harder, given our share markets these days. But opinions. We don't want to talk about football, but
what's the best career or business advice you've been given?
Shut up and listen, I think, is a pretty good one. Never be afraid to have a go. I think that's really important. Probably reflects my love of travelling and whatever else. I think they are important. I never say no to anything. I also think an important thing is you've got to have time to reflect and understand yourself, if that's fits in there as well.
Yeah, that's so important, isn't it? I think everyone is so busy and in so much of a rush these days that we don't take enough time to pause and reflect, because it's only when you reflect on what you've done and your experiences that you can learn and adapt and improve. Those periods of silence and introspection are important. Is there a daily habit or a routine in your toolkit that you think might be of value to other people?
Well, I've definitely been more focused on physical health. When I was younger, I was a big squash player, and but I'd be playing squash, not daily. So I've definitely changed that habit around. Those who know me will not be surprised about this, but I can't walk out of an office, and I've done this since I graduated. I can't go home without a clean desk, right? And I think practically that came because, one stage in Tom Price, I was the blast engineer, and whatever I worked on at 4 o'clock was not what I was going to be worked on at 8 o'clock the next day. So, but I've always done that.
Right. So you clear the desk completely?
It's reorganised, plan the day. I think that just doesn't matter whether it's 10 seconds, 30 minutes, that reflection of what you've done today, what you're doing tomorrow, that gives me calm. I think most people, once you get in that car and you go home, that's it. The world's a different world. It's related to family. So I would argue
I'm with you. I'm pretty neat and tidy, and I clear my desk every day as well and make my bed in the morning,
Well, I don't do that, David.
Well, that's a good habit to get into, just focus on the day ahead. What advice would you give your 25-year-old self to help you lead a better quality life?
Probably a bit of work-life balance. When I was kind of younger, worked pretty hard. And a couple of times I'd say maybe my leaders, weren't as focused on that, and that's where a good lead. That's something I'm very focused on now, people looking after themselves. So I would definitely say that. I probably should have taken a bit more risk in some of my career choices, even though I've done some exciting things in life, and there might have been a few other things that might have been interesting.
People don't often talk about work-life balance these days. It tends to be work-life integration, doesn't it? There's a blurring of the lines between work and the rest of your life largely because of technology and the impact it's had. So many people, choose to be available, 24/7.
Well, look, it's a nature of the world. If you look at Novo Resources, we're TSX and ASX listed, and with a lot of conversations in Canada and the United States. So time zones become a bit weird. I've always worked. Everyone's got, I think, a different way to work around it, I think. But the only thing that will go beep on my phone is a text. And I tell my people, if it's urgent, ring. Don't send an email because I'm not going to read them. So I think there's a few rules that you can put around thing, but you do need time out, whether it's, looking after the family or being at the football or having fun, I remember in my early days, I was at the Australian tennis one time and there was a cyclone coming down in Dampier, so I was in between tennis games, walking out, talking about cyclones. So yeah, you can't avoid it. Our industry, it's part of that.
Mike, you've brought some interesting insights into this conversation. You do have a very holistic life experience. So thanks very much for being our guest on Hearts and Minds. Continued good luck at Novo Resources and with the Nolans project at Arafura. We look forward to hearing more good news from those businesses.
Thank you, David.
Thanks for tuning in to Hearts and Minds. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave us a rating or share it with a friend. And don't forget to follow us and connect on social media for updates on all of our upcoming guests. I'm Alana Bray-White, and I look forward to you joining us for our next episode.